thank you so much for coming today. We've got a really exciting session lined up on the importance of personas and using personas in our marketing and communication strategy. So I'll be handing over very shortly to Becca and Evie from the audience, who will be taking us through this exciting session. I've had a sneak peek, so I know it's exciting. I can say that for sure. But to sort of introduce myself, my name's Harry. I'm the community chair of the Hotel Marketing Association. And for the last couple of years, we've been part of HOSPA, which is great because we can bring our marketing community is then far reaching into all sorts of other functions as well, which is super relevant, and there's been some really interesting overlaps that have come from that. Just as a little bit of housekeeping, we are going to have a poll at the start of this, so I'd encourage you all to interact with that poll. If there are any questions throughout any of this, please do use the Q&A as part of the meeting. We'll be able to see all the questions. I'll be sort of somewhat facilitating that, and if it's a question that I can jump in and ask in the middle of it, I will. If not, we'll maybe wait to the end. Perhaps if it's slightly disconnected to the content at the time, I might save that for the end. The session will be recorded and will be in due course uploaded to various channels. So if you want to, you can write notes, but if you want to sort of rely on the recording a bit later, then please do. Please do ask the questions. If I could maybe nominate Pamela, who I know is in the community, if you wouldn't mind just putting a test question in, just so that I can definitely see it. If I can't see it, then I will WhatsApp you, and or we can sort that out. We have had in the past where a question couldn't get through, but maybe Pamela, if you could just do a quick test question, make sure that's fine. Good. On the Hotel Marketing Association side, there's two notices. We are gearing up for the National Hotel Marketing Conference, which is on the 1st of May up at St George's Park in Burton-on-Trent. There are still tickets available, a few, not many, but a few, and that's always an amazing conference so Martin Evans, who's as part of our Hotel Marketing Association committee, has organized that for many years, and it is always a wonderful conference. So please do Google National Hotel Marketing Conference. I'll try and put the link in the chat. And then we also have our Hotel Marketing Awards on the 16th of June, which is at the Savoy this year, just confirming speakers and all sorts of exciting things there. So if you are at all connected to hotel marketing, please do come along to that, because it will be a wonderful event. We'll also be announcing the shortlist of the Hotel Marketing Awards at the National Hotel Marketing Conference as well. So those are your updates. Without further ado, I will hand over to the wonderful Becca and Evie, who will be taking us through this session. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves and the audience, and take us from there. And Pamela, I have seen the test question come through. Thank you very much. Please do ask questions as you wish throughout the session.
Thank you, Harry. And thank you everyone for joining today. Love to see some familiar faces out there, as well as some new ones. I'm Becca. I'm Client Services Director at the Audience, as well as at our sister agency, DT. My job is extremely varied, but ultimately I oversee the PR teams, and I'm responsible for client and our team happiness. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. My background is a real mix of B2C and B2B PR, and I've worked with some leading industry names, including Hilton, IHG, also the Belfry, hello Gail, De Vere, British Airways, and many, many others. So I'll hand over to Evie, who will introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Evie. I'm an account director here at the Audience. I have nearly 10 years experience working in travel, tourism, PR, working with leading hotel brands in the UK, but also across the world. We also work with a really great team who have an amazing vast experience working in hospitality, travel and leisure too.
So we'll tell you a little bit about the Audience. So ultimately, we help our clients grow bookings, visitors and revenue through a real focus on audiences, so extending the reach of marketing efforts to new audiences, and also looking at messaging and targeting to make sure that our clients are communicating effectively both to their current and existing audiences, but also to new ones. We were founded just over a year ago when we made the move to separate out the travel and tourism side of our work from the meetings and events. We have a sister agency called Davies Tanner, who quite a few of you are probably familiar with, who operate in the MICE industry, for want of a better term. And we have a roster of clients that includes hotels, venues, visitor attractions, associations and trade events, including World Travel Market. And really everything we do is about putting the audience at the heart of our comms campaigns, because we firmly believe that if you know your audiences really thoroughly and understand really clearly how to reach them and the sort of messages and platforms that resonate with them, that is the most effective way to drive your business growth. Evie, do you want to thank you? So as I've mentioned, very much focused on audiences. It takes quite a lot of work to really understand them, and we put a lot of time and effort into understanding how they travel, how they spend their leisure time, what's their motivation to book, how they find out about travel opportunities, where they read about them, watch them, listen to content that inspires them. And we also work really closely with our clients to understand their existing audiences, because I think that's really, really key. You know, you have your existing audiences, the better you can understand them and in more depth, better, but also your existing audiences aren't necessarily the only audiences you want to communicate to. So it's understanding, in line with your business objectives, where you want to go with this. And we use these audience insights to implement campaigns across traditional print media, online media. Obviously, social media is ever increasingly important, and certainly as PRs, we're more and more seeing the social media side coming over under our remit, given it's very content driven and messaging driven, of course. But also in-person events, trade shows, networking events, how you can use those to reach your audiences. And we're also going to talk a bit about brand partnerships, because these, from our point of view, we believe are one of the best ways to really grow your audience and extend your reach.
So what we're basically going to cover today, so we're going to touch on what actually is audience mapping and how to really effectively build your audience personas in a lot of detail, and then how to integrate your personas into your marketing plans, and then how to also reap the benefits. So to start with, let me just grab a poll. We want to ask you a question. When was the last time you actually carried out an audience mapping exercise? Now let me just, my poll button has gone. Becca or Harry, would you be able to bring it up for me, please?
Yeah, I can do that. Oh, my poll button has gone as well, Harry. It was there earlier. Have you got it, Harry? Oh, you're on mute, Harry.
Apologies. People are filling it out. So
oh, cool.
It looks like the attendees can fill it out. We've had 14 people do it.
Oh, good-o. We can't actually see the results.
You can't see the results.
Harry.
Okay, then I shall tell you.
Thank you.
So we've had 20, or so we have 17 people answering it all the time. So these percentages might change. We have 29% people saying in the last 2 years. Ooh, 18% have said over 2 years ago. 47% say I can't remember, and 12% say never. So the majority of so only 30% are in the last 2 years.
Okay. So some people are on it.
Well, so a clear and focused audience map is kind of the base upon which all other PR and marketing efforts should sit. And obviously, the more we know and understand our audiences, the more precisely we can offer products and services suit them with carefully tailored messaging content via the most appropriate channels. However, it is important that you continue to update and refresh these personas based on changing audience behaviours, trends, and different channels of communication, especially now being in a digital and social first world, which we'll also touch on a bit more detail. Now, whilst it's also really important to digest external data, it's also really equally important to really drill down into your existing audiences so you can then extend your reach even further. For example, looking at customers' behaviour whilst on property, so you can then tailor your communication to them, knowing exactly what they like to do during their stay.
So in terms of where to start and how to build out personas for your audiences. So the first step is obviously to identify who they are. And we'd suggest you start with your existing customers, really using your own data and insights to understand who they are, how they come to you, what their buying habits are from you, and also overlaying that with where they sit in terms of your business growth, what your targets are and how they can contribute to that. Because I think one really important thing to note is while your existing audiences, it's really important that you continue to engage with them and look at how you do that. Obviously, everyone wants to drive and grow their business. So they're only one facet of what you need to be looking at. You need to be looking at your business objectives and what kind of audiences will help you achieve those and how you can reach them. So once you've gone through the process of looking at who your audiences are now and who you would like them to be, you can look at how to extend these, whether it's, are you looking for a more aspirational customer with higher spend? Are you looking to drive more transient leisure visitors? Are you looking to target a new geographic territory, and so on? So you need to have a look at that and peg those again against sort of business and sales objectives and areas for growth. And then have a look at, and you could end up with quite a large number of audiences doing this, but it's really crucial, obviously, that you don't let it become too fragmented. So again, overlaying this in terms of business priority areas so that you can focus your time and budget on targeting the right audiences who are going to drive your business forward is really key. Once you've identified your audiences, and we would suggest that depending on your business size and scope, you look at initially between maybe 5 and 10 different audiences, and you might then want to tier those in order of importance. But once you've identified your broad audience categories, you can begin adding layers of information to this. So building them out into what some of you might have heard of the term pen portrait. We tend to use the term personas, but it's really building out a picture of your audience beyond the basic demographics, looking at their likes, their dislikes, what motivates them to travel, how they do their research for travel, who they talk to, where they watch content, do they not watch content, do they read content? There's so much to think about, and it does take a bit of time, but it's adding layers so you really have a deep understanding of your audiences and how you want to reach them. So, it may be that, that your retired audience couple tend to stay for a night, they live locally, they always dine in the restaurant. You can add this and then use that to do more sort of desk-based research to add a bit of colour to that. Also, tap into your own data, whether that's web analytics, social listening, anything your sales team can tell you. All of that can be overlaid on top of the sort of more general demographic data. There is then also an absolute wealth of information out on the good old internet, whether that's white papers, surveys, media insights. It can be really time consuming, but it's well worth investing some time doing that research and looking at how those audiences, as I say, interact, how they buy, and drilling down into what that means for your audiences and your business. I'd suggest, because it is really time consuming, if you don't have the money for an external resource to do that, you do it sort of by a handful of personas at a time and really focus on those ones that you think are going to make the biggest difference to your business. I think it's also important to note that don't just focus on your B2C audiences, think about your internal audience as well, your team and how you communicate and interact with them. But there's also stakeholders, industry bodies, associations, investors, and also the media as well. So it's a huge world out there, but really by tiering it and taking quite a methodical approach, you can make it much more achievable, but really add value. As I said, try and focus on maybe 5 to 10 max to start with, depending on the size of the business. 5 might be plenty, but if not, we wouldn't suggest more than 10. It's very easy for your activity then to become very fragmented and budget to be spent in too many different places and not really getting any value from any of it.
Brilliant. And so just kind of expanding on to what Becca just said. So this is kind of just a snapshot of kind of information that we would suggest delving into when creating your personas. Now, obviously, it's not just about where your audiences live and what they like, but it's really taking into account their income, whether they have a family, the reason behind their trip, their budget, where they are booking, and how far in advance they are planning. It's also really important to understand the brands that your audience affiliate with, which transport providers they use, how they're getting to you, their go-to luggage brands and their hobbies, and also take into consideration expectations of their stay and whether or not you can actually really deliver that. And most importantly, where they are consuming that information and what their biggest influences are. And now this is just a snapshot, but after the webinar, we do have a blank template that we can send to you, which kind of includes all these different pointers to help you create kind of a bit more in-depth persona too.
I might just jump in with a quick question. We've had one in the chat, which was it's anonymous attendee, but thank you for the question anyway. How can we find out information about the audience beyond their behavior on the property? So what are the go-to resources to actually find out things like the likes and influences of their behavior? So yeah,
there are a multitude of resources. A good place to start is with some of the research companies. Quite a lot of them, with Mintel and a few others, will have, some of it is paid for content, but they do also have free to access reports. A lot of the social media channels will publish reports as well, and data and analytics. So it's well worth looking at that. But also a lot of our comms and marketing industry titles hold really valuable resources. There are also some consumer brands that do some really lovely, easy to digest reports that talk about the broader socio-economic world that can be really useful. So John Lewis do an annual report, which is really interesting. It's fairly light, it's easy reading, but it just adds sort of that softer data on buying trends, what people are looking for now, and certainly when you're looking at that leisure audience, there are some really useful insights in that. But what we can do is when we follow up, when Harry circulates the sort of template and document after, we're very happy to pop in a few links through to some useful resources actually, because there are quite a few. But one of the best ways I find is just literally Googling this stuff. It's amazing what you can find out there. Lots of the industry associations as well have really useful resources. The world is your oyster out there, but it's knowing where to look. But yeah, we can share some top line suggestions for good starting points, and then you can go down into a real rabbit hole with this stuff. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that'd be really useful. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. So once you have sort of established who your key audiences are, the next stage is to do some audience mapping. So explore how your customers, what your customer's journey is to find you, and as a result of that, what you can offer each audience, and how you might be able to very simply and easily tweak or tailor your offer to resonate with that audience. On the next slide, we'll sort of show you a bit of a top line template for what that might look like, but it's broken down into 4 phases. So the discovery phase, so how and where do your customers do their research and find out about opportunities to travel and where they might want to stay. The planning stage, so how do they research, plan and book their stays and their leisure time, their actual time on site with you, and then sharing, so both during and after their visit, how and where are they sharing that? Because obviously, a huge benefit of having engaged audiences is that sharing with family, friends, and the wider world. If you're looking at content creators, to share positive news and stories about your property. So what are the touch points that they use, and how can you connect with them, and what is their booking behavior? So for example, a lot of audiences may be booking via OTAs. Obviously the dream is that they don't do that, they book direct. So how and where do you reach them with that messaging to encourage them to book directly with you? And when you've kind of mapped all this out, it's really thinking about what want or need are you catering for with your product or with your packages, what challenge are you solving for them, how can you encourage them to book directly with you, and how well do you meet their specific, that audience's specific needs when it comes to service, price, facilities, experiences, which are increasingly key for travelers. Is there something you could do more of? Are there simple experiences that you could partner with a local business to deliver and package up to attract a specific audience? And one of the, as we mentioned earlier, we'll come on to brand partnerships in a couple of slides time, but this is a really great way of extending your offer to reach new audiences, giving them something a little bit different and something that encourages them to put you front of mind when they're booking. Do you want to just skip on to a little example, Evie? So this just might not be that easy to see on your screens, but again, we can pop this in the follow-up. But this just is an example of mapping out customer journeys to you. So the discovery phase, what are they looking for? What do they want from a stay? What are the requirements they're looking for? What are the actions that they take at this stage? And what are the touch points? So how are they finding out about this? What platforms are they using to research? Then the planning stage, the actual visiting stage, so when they're on site, and the sharing stage, which overlaps both when they're on site, but also afterwards, sharing their experience with, as I say, family, friends, and also the wider world when it comes to content creators and media. So we'll share this with you, but this just gives you a bit of an example of a sort of fairly simple and clean way of laying it out as part of your audience mapping process.
Brilliant. So once you then have a robust audience map and have a really better understanding of your customer's journey to you, you can then work on channel mapping. So you know that you engage with your customers through a range of different channels, and these channels are obviously crucial routes of communication between you and your customer. And obviously, you know, these channels can be digital, website, social, or either physical with print media, ads, etc. However, customers do change their spending habits, and you need to go where your customers are, which means creating new channels to meet your customers and where they're spending the majority of their time. And now, obviously, in a very much social first world, influencer relations is increasingly integral part of a well-rounded marketing and comms campaign too. So working with content creators, you can increase your audience reach and following and create a sense of kind of brand loyalty as well as a key touch point in your customer's journey. So social media does need to be considered as one of the main channels of comms for a large proportion of your audiences now. But it's also just important not just to focus on the content creators with large followers. Now micro and nano influencers are more than likely to have a much more engaged and focused audience too. And then there are a few kind of tips that we have which will help kind of strengthen your social media presence and also customer engagement. And also we can kind of follow up with a few of these links too. And just a tool to mention is social listening tool. So a tool which we've used is Brandwatch, would kind of really recommend it. So you can really better understand how and when people are consuming your content and also figure out how they're engaging. Obviously, one thing to focus on, social friendly video content just allows your consumers to digest and engage much quicker with your content. People, let's not forget, sorry, people just help to create such a much stronger connection with your audiences too. And also not forgetting kind of encouraging and incentivizing your audience to post as well, just to help create more UGC as well, which will help you in the long run. And not forgetting LinkedIn as a platform just to help grow your corporate audience, to help kind of enhance those B2B and stakeholder relations too.
I think it's just also here just important to note that you may not be across all of these platforms at the moment, and I think depending on your team size and budget size, you need to be realistic about where you can get best value, because if you're, for example, if you're not on TikTok and are considering TikTok, it can be really time consuming because you have to be regularly generating content for that. You can't dip in, dip out because you just won't get the value from it. So, you know, think about which channels are going to work best for you and where to focus your efforts. And you know, there are certain channels that are much better for targeting certain audiences. So it may be that you want to divert some time that's currently on one channel slightly more to another. But when you're planning this, do sort of have a think about that and how that might work against your time and budget. Brand partnerships. I'm quite evangelical about brand partnerships. I've already mentioned them several times. These are, a good and effective brand partnership is such a brilliant way of extending your reach and connecting with new audiences. So collaborating with a sort of like-minded brand, if you know who your audiences are and what other brands they have an affinity with and respect, you can explore partnerships with them. It may be that it's a cosmetics brand that certain audiences love, that you could look at creating some kind of a partnership with, and that might look like a simple one-off package. It could be a gin tasting package with a local distillery, for example, but it could be that you could explore a much longer term, more in-depth package that goes beyond just typical PR, but into longer term marketing and affiliation. It could be competitions. But I think it's really important as part of this to not just look necessarily at other travel brands or brands. It could be a slightly more unconventional, unexpected brand partnership, but one that resonates with your audience. And in doing that, there are so many opportunities for data collection to get your messaging to an audience who actually maybe don't know about you yet, but are likely to have some kind of interest in your brand. So more unconventional brand partnerships. You have to be slightly brave to look at some of them, but I do think there is huge value in that. And it could be a brand with really strong eco credentials, because one of your audiences actually genuinely that is part of their buying process. But it's also a really nice opportunity to create more compelling and message rich content for your audiences. We've done quite a lot of this. We do it for many of our clients, sort of really thinking about what the client's key messages are, what their mission and purpose is, and aligning that with other brands, and then creating bespoke partnerships. It can really help drive revenue as well, the right partnership. So a really effective way not only of growing your audience, but and sort of cementing that relationship with existing audiences potentially, but also bringing new audiences in and driving revenue. So how do you take all of this and integrate it into your marketing plans? So it's really about online is, as we all know, we know the powers that be often like the third factor of a good piece of print coverage, but actually there's so much more scope online and across the digital footprint. So really thinking about what your audience's presence is on there, how they consume their news and content, where they consume their news and content, that can really help you produce this tailored content for them. And I know there's sometimes still a nervousness around video content and being on screen and the quality of video content. But I think the beauty of social media is that, there is an expectation that it isn't so super slick and seamless always. And it's a great way of conveying the personality and some of the faces behind your brand as well, which really helps with that emotional connection with your audiences. So really look at, leading with online content, social and video content where you can. Really important as well to have clear calls to actions for your audiences. And again, this is a really, strong place where brand partnerships can come in and really help you do that. And also look at once you've targeted and reached and connected with these audiences, how do you stay in touch with those audiences? How do you continue to engage with them? Is it on your monthly newsletters? Is it sort of regular little small competitions, or is it something much bigger? So really have a think about what kind of content works for your audiences, where and how you can integrate that into your plans. And it doesn't have to be, as I say, really expensive, very high production value content at all, as long as it's, not too rough around the edges, filming on your smartphone, as long as it's high resolution, is absolutely fine. There's lots of editing software as well that you can use for free to just tidy things up. So yeah, I think it's really important. It can be integrated. Your audiences can be integrated through everything, through your media understanding, through trade events and networking events as well. They're all there. So it's thinking about how to connect with them in all the different places where they're present.
Brilliant. And so it's so important to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to knowing who your audiences are, their behaviours, and ultimately how they're researching you. And so obviously constantly monitoring and tracking the news, trends and key insights allows us to actually kind of newsjack and respond really quickly to kind of different social trends. You also need to be constantly gathering data about your target audiences, which will then allow you to produce the content that lands in the right places to be seen by your audience. And that also cuts through quite a busy, obviously, media landscape too. Now, from online publications to social media outlets, digital platforms are now the main channels of communication for your consumers, for most of them. Now, this approach also supports not only to help increase your brand awareness, but will also support your kind of wider marketing strategy to also help optimize your online presence. Oh, sorry, went a slide too quickly. And so finally, speaking to the hospitality, travel, leisure and national press daily, we know what's on top of the media's agenda and speak to journalists all about what's swaying the media landscape and what their readers want and what they're booking. So taking an example, the Daily Mail are currently writing about summer festivals and places to stay. So we can take these topics and link them back to your audiences. For example, whether it's family accommodation or you're looking to target couples in their 40s and 50s looking for a much more kind of luxury stay, it's knowing what's being spoken about in the news agenda to then be able to really tactically link it back to your audiences. Yeah, we also meet regularly with journalists and writers from the national travel lifestyle press, so we know exactly what they're writing about and when. For example, a contact of ours, Angelina Villa-Clark, writes for Forbes. She's writing about multi-generational stays coming up, and Bernadette Fallon's writing about Christmas in July. So knowing this means you can actually really tailor your specific content based on what journalists are writing about, knowing what your audiences are also going to attract to. So yes, I do believe actually that is time. And just finally, Harry will wrap up as well, but we're just going to offer all HMA members a discovery call with the audience if you're interested, and also we'll follow up with some kind of really helpful resources and our template as well, if that would be of interest.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, we have a question that I need to get to on the Q&A, but we have a hand up by Jessica Smith. So I have a button to say allow to talk. You're welcome. So I'll do that now. Oh no.
Oh,
sorry. The hand is now down.
Fair enough.
Jessica, if you'd like to put your question in the chat, or that would be great on the Q&A. But the first one we have
to add, Harry. Sorry, just that we did sort of I know we did the poll earlier, and
yes,
only 30% of people had looked at their audiences regularly. I think it's really important that as part of this, you do, if you're going to go to the trouble of putting together personas, you do refresh them fairly regularly, but also in putting together a campaign to target the audiences, there is an element of trial and error. There are some things that you think are going to work that perhaps don't have quite the impact that you think they will, and other things that work really well. So it's like everything in comms and marketing, there is an element of trial and error and tweaking and being a little bit nimble and flexible, and finding out what really works. So with all the best planning in the world, there are still nuances that you can't cater for without trying things first.
Absolutely. And I think actually that kind of leads into one of our questions that we had from earlier on from Natalie, to saying we're familiar with creating personas, but we feel like we're making too many assumptions with it.
Yes.
So I'd be interesting just to hear your thoughts on how we marry up obviously the data-driven piece and then obviously the vision piece. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that.
And again, I think you're absolutely right, Natalie, that there is a level of assumption in all of this, and that comes from, based on your experience or based on our experience and understanding of audiences. But this is where this sort of testing and trial really comes through. It's making sure that you're tracking what you're doing and monitoring it and tweaking it it's not quite working, if the messaging in your content isn't quite working, you know, is it the looking at your tone, the language that you're using, where you are, and tweaking and tailoring that. And it is this ongoing research. You know, it's not just a right, my personas are done, I shall park them and use them. It's just keeping an eye on what's going on in the wider world and what the social trends are, what are the social media trends as well, and tweaking it in relation to that. So, you know, it's not a precise science. It's fair to say it is very nuanced, and no two people are the same, even though they might fall into the same audience bracket. So it is about being a little bit nimble and flexible, and not being afraid to change what you're doing if it's not quite giving you the results that you want.
Yeah, I think the assumption bit there, one of the things that I really latched onto initially was root them in your business goals. Because if you drive, let's say you have a, you know, perhaps a traditional luxury property whose the audience perhaps is, you know, perhaps an older demographic, but but if you do data-driven personas, you know, that's where that's where a lot of the money is coming from now, and that's sort of our history. But a business goal might be trying to reach, you know, a younger audience, perhaps more local, certainly for the F&B side of things, transient. And interestingly, that's where, if you're purely data driven and not making assumptions, it won't necessarily let you kind of rethink it in terms of like new business goals. So
yeah, exactly that.
But yeah, with the next one we have is, do we have an example of a hotel brand that has perhaps done a partnership that's really stood out for you, or any kind of brand partnerships that have, this is a question from Gail, that are perhaps memorable for you and that have really stood out?
Oh, well, thanks, Gail. This is quite an old one, and actually you may have heard us tell you about this one before. But we did one quite a while ago with McDonald Hotels and Thorntons. And it was much more, you know, a lot of the partnerships that we tend to do are fair, you know, slightly shorter term. It involves an experience bolt-on package and perhaps a competition, but this ran through sort of, it covered those aspects, but it also there were offers printed on till receipts for every customer in a Thorntons store. It was a much longer running and more comprehensive partnership than previously. But I think, you know, when you're looking at partnerships, we've done all sorts of partnerships, but it's one of those funny areas where it can add such value, but I think sometimes it can be looked at as rather than a longer term relationship with a brand, as a one-off activation. And actually if you get the right brand, there's much more merit in looking upon it as a longer term partnership and building out something much chunkier rather than something one-off. And what does that look like, and how can you integrate your brand? So if it is you know, I'll just use a cosmetics brand, for example. You know, what can you do on property with them? What can you do in some of their outlets with them? How can you harness their online audience, their database, and have something much longer running? Could it become part of a loyalty program? There's so much scope, but I think sometimes people are a little bit put off by some of the unknowns that come with it. But provided you find the right brand and you have the time and energy to invest in creating something quite bespoke, you could do something really fantastic with it. And it, you know, again, it's down to each individual hotel group in terms of what they are able to do operationally as well. And I think that sometimes can be a bit of a barrier, is what's operationally feasible and what's not. So yeah, I mean, the brand partnerships world is your oyster. There's all sorts we can do, but yeah, one of the bigger ones that we've done was McDonald Hotels and Thorntons, and that went sort of through the line, which was great.
Brilliant, thank you. Natalie had a follow-up question on kind of the assumptions, making assumptions about personas, and it was, do you use any sort of questionnaires or sort of first-party research tools to kind of understand the audience a bit more beyond traditional like CRM data and booking data? Yeah,
absolutely. There are loads of paid for tools out there that you can use, but the downside of that is that they are paid for and they can be really expensive. You know, you can look at focus groups as well, paid for focus groups with target audiences, but again, it comes down to budget. So there are lots of avenues you can go down, but most of our clients don't have the budget to spend on that more bespoke level of research. So it is, it is a lot of desk-based research behind putting these together, but also drawing on, our wider industry footprint. So beyond the hotel audience, we work with World Travel Market and other trade shows, and there's a lot of connections and content that we glean through doing that is actually directly applicable to our clients. So we're quite lucky that we have various pieces of data at our fingertips like that, but it really does come down to budget with this kind of stuff, and if you've got the budget to look at a more bespoke research project to drill down into your audience, focus groups is a really good way of doing it. But you can also do broader targeted surveys, but they do require investment behind them. But we, again, if you want us to put a couple of pointers of companies that can help with that, we can pop those into the follow-up doc.
I'm sure that'd be very useful. Thank you. We have one more question from Pamela in the Q&A, which was, do we believe that audience personas and mapping work within the traditional typical hotel market segments, or do we need to look outside of these?
No, absolutely witin, but also, it's looking well outside that as well, but it does work within the traditional segments. But it's drawing on as broad a breadth of audiences and people and content as you can.
Interesting. So I think the one of the things that I sort of come up against and have queries on is, so for a destination, there are so many different overlapping revenue streams, and I know we spoke about kind of 5 to 10 perhaps personas as a starting point for your business that are perhaps prioritized based on business goals. I'd be just interested to hear your thoughts on how the complexity and the variety of different revenue streams perhaps within a hotel can be, I guess, clarified perhaps within these personas, because obviously those 5 or 10 are going to span multiple revenue streams and are important in different ways to different ones.
Absolutely. I mean, you could flip it on its head and look at your revenue streams and sort of at the top. So I don't know why I'm doing all these hand gestures. I can't help myself when I'm explaining something like this. You could look at your revenue streams, then how the audiences fall under that. So rather than looking at your audiences first and which revenue streams are their main touch points, look at your revenue streams and then which audiences are your I suppose key focuses for that, and tier them in that way, because your transient leisure audience probably has a very different footprint to your your M&E audience or your overnights audience. It's kind of overlaying it as some kind of simple matrix would probably I love a matrix, would probably work quite well to do this. But again, it's about not fragmenting your activity too much. So it's probably, again, looking at what are your business objectives and main areas for growth, and which audiences and which parts of which revenue streams are going to really deliver that, and focusing on those.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. They were coming up to the 45. So
oh, wow.
beautifully ended in that time. If there are any more questions, then we will absolutely just put them in, and if we want to sort of we'll summarize these and can send it all out to the attendees of the meeting. As you can see there is an email address for the wonderful guys at the audience to basically take any conversations further if you want to.
Yeah, very happy to answer any other questions offline.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Becca. Thank you so much, Evie, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you all for attending and for all the interesting questions. We'll be following up in due course and I think the resources, particularly around where to go for some of that sort of bought in data, those Mintels, those industry reports, is going to be really useful. The frameworks that we went through today, that you can kind of have that starting point to start mapping these audiences and creating those personas. And obviously, as you said, that discovery call for people just to talk through that kind of thing with you guys is obviously going to be it could be a very powerful thing for them. So lots to follow up on, but thank you for taking us through that. It's been wonderful. So we'll leave it there, and we'll see you all on the next one.
Thank
you so much.
Bye.